Hello and welcome again to the Gaming News Canada show. As always, I'm your host, Steve McAllister. When it comes to the world of big brands in the global sports technology and wagering industry, Sportradar ranks right up there with the giants. The company recently released its latest financial results, highlighted by a 29% year-over-year hike in revenue, with a large helping hand from its betting technologies and solutions revenues. And with the Paris Olympics filling the usual void in the summer sports calendar, and with the start of the U.S. college football and NFL seasons kicking off a busy fall schedule, which of course includes the Major League Baseball playoffs and the start of the NBA and NHL regular seasons, Sportradar and everyone else with skin in the sports technology and betting games are excited about the current quarter. To try and catch up with everything on Sportradar's overflowing plate these days, but really just to dig into a part of the business that we usually don't cover here on the show, we welcome to the Gaming News Canada show for the first time the company's head of paid social, Michael Cryan. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. It's glad to be here.
Mike joins us from Dublin, as in Ireland, not the wee little southwestern town burg of 80 residents, which is about a 70-minute drive from Gaming News Canada headquarters here in Kincardine. Mike, I just want to start, as I mentioned off before we hit the record button, taking a look at your LinkedIn profile this morning, and it just this was a batting practice fastball for the first question. How the hell does a guy who studied classical and jazz guitar at the George Washington University end up on this podcast?
Wow. The shortest version I can give you is I graduated in 2011. The job market was a bit lean for classical guitarists. And I kind of just, took what I could get, got started in a marketing adjacent role. And my family are from Ireland originally, so I was able to make a move over here. Anybody who's been to Dublin before knows the music scene is quite good. So initially I came here with that in mind and, had to pay the bills. So kept working in the marketing side of things. And about 11 years ago, I got my first job in the paid social space. Bit of luck and grace from my first employer, and kind of learned on the job and went from there. And I can give you the really long version if you like, but yeah, that's the short one.
Yeah, well, that's big. Does beg the follow-up question. And again, you're a guy who's worked in the travel and entertainment space at TikTok, and before that with the global gaming and sales group of Meta. Again, how does someone like you end up in the business of sports technology and gaming?
I think to answer the question of kind of why I'm here and why I'm at Sportradar is I suppose there's a couple of reasons I see. I think for me, I've worked in the entertainment space more broadly for a while now. At TikTok, spent 3.5 years, like you alluded to, focused on product strategy and go-to-market for what we called our entertainment vertical. That included sports, but also broader media and entertainment, theatrical studios, etc. And before that was working mainly with casual mobile gaming and traditional video games publishers. And I think, within that, I kind of always observed the real money gaming space and the iGaming space more broadly, and kind of, always had my eye on it. And I think Sportradar, as they've kind of built out their marketing services offering, we're kind of looking for someone with my background. I think the iGaming thing was a bit covered there. There's a lot of experts on my team and more broadly in the company, and they were kind of looking for somebody, I think, to come in and kind of be that channel expert in paid social, which I suppose I am, given my background. And so I think I've had a lot of experience in entertainment, gaming, right? But this whole space of real money gaming and the iGaming space particularly is a bit new for me. So it's been nice to kind of bring my broader background with the paid social stuff and pair it and learn a bit more too about what's going on in the sports industry more broadly, the business, and then specifically in the betting industry.
I'm thinking personal. You may have crossed paths with Martin Calgill, my former colleague at Yahoo Sports, who's now the global BD sports lead guy for TikTok, and Martin's a UK guy too. So I'm sure you guys have, if you have met, have probably had a conversation or two about soccer.
I know his name, but to be honest, actually, we hadn't met. I was working a little more product facing probably, so we didn't overlap too much.
Hey, Mike, I would like to get into the whole paid social topic, because again, you're the first person I think we've had on the podcast who's kind of got expertise in this area, and when you think about Sportradar, you think about a company that's got its tentacles in every piece of the sport industry, and including partnerships with the ATP and the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, FIFA, Bundesliga. Just last month, announced an extended and expanded partnership with UEFA. I think as an exciting time for soccer, not just in Europe, but in all parts of the world. And I think we continue to see, a rapid growth and popularity in the U.S. in particular on this side of the ocean. I just love to ask you to just walk me through your job description with Sportradar, and how that it aligns with the other pieces of Sportradar's business.
Sure. So, I imagine your audience probably know us more for our core business, on kind of the structured sports data side, integrity trading, et cetera. But they may not know us as well for our marketing services division. So that is kind of the complement to what I think Sportradar have been doing for some time on the core side of things. And again, you're testing my knowledge, having only been in the business a couple of months in the history. But I believe back in like 2019, they sort of took the plunge in starting this ads business as a way of kind of helping with the acquisition engine for all of their partners, right? And so that started primarily with programmatic advertising. We've built a kind of custom DSP and have a lot of gambling safe inventory, et cetera. And with that, though, that's progressed by channel, right? Because obviously the operators themselves have a need across, they want to have their messaging, their ads across multiple channels. And so paid social, your audience may or may not be aware, is actually the second largest channel for gambling brands to invest in, particularly in the US right now. So it became, kind of, I think, quite a logical move for them to see where they could slot in there. And I could talk a little bit more about our kind of our point of view on that, because I think paid social is one of those areas where the kind of partner ecosystem is so broad, and everybody's doing different things, and it's kind of actually matured quite a bit now. So the kind of strategic direction of each company is very, very different. And for us, it's really about focusing on iGaming specifically. That's what we've kind of done. Our product suite today in paid social is very much like akin to every other channel we've done, dedicated to the industry and kind of built from the ground up with them in mind, the operators, and trying to help grow their businesses. So I suppose that's the general kind of direction that Sportradar is taking in growing this out and bringing someone like me on board.
Can you give an example, Mike, of how, a partnership, say, for example, the ATP, the US Open starts today as we record this podcast, and what role Sportradar may have in I guess, heightening awareness around the US Open, or obviously with the Major League Baseball playoffs around the corner, just how your job description fits with what the leagues might be doing?
Absolutely. So I think the way we most directly impact, on what the leagues are doing right now is through that partnership with the operator themselves and what they want to feature in their ads, right? So we're led primarily by the sports and the events that they want to promote, right? And where we plug in is, for instance, if you take the ATP example you used, if an operator wants to highlight a suite of matches, it's quite arduous to do so today on paid social. Like, there are 5 or 6, channels, really 3 or 4 kind of major channels, let's say, different, specific managers, ads managers they need to go into, et cetera. It's quite difficult for them to produce creative and do that. We help streamline that. And we also help bring in live odds and insights into their creative, right? So for the example of the ATP, an operator might say, hey, we have a suite of matches we want to feature, but we're really struggling with the creative production. My team help with that, and we can kind of come in, either handle that end to end, that kind of creative production to campaign management, fulfillment, et cetera, kind of process, or we can simply consult and provide our technology as well, to support the operators if they have an in-house team that they're working with already to manage that activity. And so our kind of technology stack is really centered around streamlining their workflows, helping them kind of level up their creative, and bringing in that expertise and data that we already have and we're known for in the industry, but kind of parlaying that into a marketing use case for the operators. So it's, I suppose, a long-winded way of saying, when it comes to what's happening in the sports calendar, whatever the operators are kind of looking for in terms of where they think the value is going to be, or what's going to be resonating with their audiences, and to bring in new bettors, they work with us to kind of highlight that and streamline.
And then I would think one of the benefits of those partnerships, Mike, is the Sportradar having the ability, again, through rights, is to be able to use those highlights videos or the other video content that the ATP or the other sports leagues have to really create dynamic video content.
Yeah, I wouldn't be an expert in that particular piece, like the crossover from our streaming and AV piece, say for instance with the ATP into what my team are doing right now. What I can tell you, like I suppose to take a step back and talk a little more about maybe what we are doing with dynamic video, is that we are able to lean on the sports data and the exclusive rights that we have in partnerships with the leagues to kind of inform the creative in different ways. So something we're exploring at the moment, you might have seen in the press release that came out with our dynamic video release, is how we incorporate different insights into creative, right? And how we kind of lean on that and help scale those kind of unique, compelling, resonant insights for sports fans around creative. So I'm an NFL fan, take the NFL for an example, right? Week 1, creative might feature, I'm a Giants fan, and it might be something along the lines of, unfortunately, Daniel Jones' passing yard average or something like that, right? Might feature creative. And these are the sort of things that we're looking to kind of help bring into the fold and at scale. And that's, where also we're looking to, invest in the future and kind of grow the offering out from there.
It's interesting. You had a post, I think, from a couple of weeks ago, and on the rise in short form video consumption. And I think for guys of my vintage, I mean, we still turn on the old fashioned television, and we have cable, and we're watching games for 3 hours. And what we've seen as the father of 3 kids, including a son who watches a lot of sports, I mean, those people in their 20s they're not watching games for 3 hours. They're watching highlights, and they're scrolling social media, and they're consuming sports on different platforms now. Again, I'm kind of covering this is old real estate, but do you see any changing trends in that short form video consumption, and what is it that the sports fans in particular are looking for, or what sports bettors in particular might be looking for?
I don't see a change in that trend, in the sense that I see it continuing to rise. If you look at like eMarketer data, I can tell you in my time in the platforms that I've worked at, TikTok and Meta, over the last kind of 6 years, it's continuing to sort of trend upward in terms of the consumption pattern of short form video. I think what I have seen that's been really interesting, particularly at TikTok, I noticed this as I was there most recently before Sportradar, is I think with the rise in video and social media, initially there's a bit of perhaps fear or I suppose a bit of hesitancy from traditional media to embrace that, right? And particularly for the sports leagues, though, now I think what they're seeing is the idea of dual screening, right? Like, so if someone's on a social media app scrolling on their couch while they watch sports, their attention is split. The attention economy is not necessarily zero sum, right? So I think a lot of the leagues have learned to kind of engage their fans and invest in their social media, both their own handles, like the organic side, and also bring content in on the paid side of things during matches, during events, that is going to be viewed and engaged with by the sports fans, right? So I think, surely it'll have to cap at some point. We only have so much time in the day, and people can only spend so much time on apps, but certainly hasn't really seemed to slow just yet. I think the latest data I've seen is that TikTok report around an hour a day people are spending on the app, and Reels say something like 35, 40 minutes. So, quite a hefty amount of time that I think, all advertisers, regardless of vertical, need to think about, but particularly for the sports business, they need to think about kind of how they capitalize on that pattern and create native advertising content that doesn't just stand out. A lot of what we see today in terms of creative strategies from the operators is, still from an acquisition standpoint, quite offer led, quite traditional, very static image heavy, right? But how do we think about kind of taking, this trend that we're seeing and very, of kind of very UGC, like very stripped down, not particularly always polished, short form video consumption, and weave my brand in there, but stay true to my brand codes. It's a tough challenge, and that's what we're really thinking about right now. One of the pillars of like what my business is looking at, my team and I should say, are looking at for the future.
Yeah, and I think that's one area, Mike, where broadcasters and leagues are still struggling with bringing in betting content with especially regulated sports betting is still quite new in North America, right? 2018 when PASPA was overturned, 2021 when Bill C-218 was passed here in Canada to legalize single event sports betting. And I think broadcasters are still trying to figure out how do you integrate that sports betting data and information into broadcast without turning off sports fans who don't wager.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, conversely, one Gaming News Canada, but you probably don't know this, but one of our Gaming News Canada's one brand of Parlay Media Group and Homestand, which is our kind of our commercial brand. We've been doing video content now for almost 3 years on behalf of sportsbook operators. And to your point, that's been the challenge too, is trying to think outside the box and produce different dynamic content where you might not have access to rights, but you want to engage people. And it's not just about the offers. And I think that's probably the one thing about the market here in Ontario where you can't offer bonuses through advertising or paid social. And I think that's forced operators who in North America just were, in the US were throwing up offers to sign up for a sports book. I think the operators here in Ontario have had to be a lot more creative about how they attract customers.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of the beauty of social though for me, as well, is that it's this channel where you have immense reach. I mean, relative to, even traditional kind of offline media, it's still exceptional in terms of, you could reach pretty much half of the humans on earth via a social network when it comes to advertising, right? But also you have this algorithmic led kind of angle into the delivery that feeds off the creative that you're producing. So when you think about experimentation around, whether it's presenting odds or offers or a kind of insight or a softer approach to the sell, so to speak, to attract a better, what you're feeding into those algorithms is basically still filtering for intent and interest, just like everyone's familiar with on the organic side, right? So you have both levers you can pull in terms of like, mass reach on those networks when you want and where appropriate, but also a bit more targeted and a bit more kind of like algorithm led. And that's can be frustrating at times because it is a black box by each platform, but at the same time, I think that's a nice kind of built-in control for things like responsible gaming, et cetera. It's a nice kind of effective control that's there versus traditional channels, let's say.
Hey, Mike, as an old guy, I go back to when Twitter came along and that second screen experience for a sports fan and for people of my age, it's second screen was watching a hockey game on a Saturday night and having my phone on and following Twitter from the game. And even to go back to 2010 when I was managing Yahoo's Canadian sports property at the Vancouver Olympics and using Cover It Live back then. And again, the second screen experience was watching the gold medal hockey game between the US and Canada and having 100,000 people on Cover It Live, participating in a live chat around the game. How do you look at second screen experiences now? And for younger sports fans, what's that experience look like? And is the second screen now 4 screens because you have sports betting happening and you have TikTok and you have Reels? And There's just all these different platforms now. Like what does a viewing experience look for a young person? Again, having said earlier that young people aren't watching games, but certainly events like the Super Bowl, I would think there's still those kids are going to tune in and watch a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think I think a few things about it. I think, well, first of all, I'm not that young, right? So this is all still this is secondhand knowledge here that I'll try to convey. But I think that particular kind of second screening experience that you're talking about, that still exists, right? Depending on age segment and demos, people are still just participating in the conversation on X now, if you will. But also, you know, there's Reddit, which is a different type of community and has that live, element piece. If you have potentially, it's very personal is where I'm kind of going with this, right? That you have segments of the population and the younger people who are big Snapchat users, and they just want to share, short form reactions and such privately with their kind of like their close network. You have people who, frankly, will just second screen TikTok in the middle of a game. Like really, it's very much depends on the user. But I do think like generally the trend is that younger people are going to continue to do this and to engage with multiple media at the same time. When it comes to, how they select, I think that's still kind of going to depend. And in terms of like, sports fans, you'll have some for sure. I have friends personally who will third screen it with a laptop still, and look at, betting opportunities, et cetera. Right. So these are things that I think are hard to quantify, like social realities. If I'm honest, when I read the data on this as well, I think we just know it's certainly happening when it comes to that. And honestly, I would never encourage an operator or any sports brand to be too heavy up on one channel versus another. I think they each have their own, unique kind of surfaces and properties and also audiences to an extent. I think there's always, a decent amount of overlap across all these platforms, but each of them have their own incremental pockets. And I think the kind of the job to be done for operators there is figuring out, who, like which of those incremental pockets are where, and how do I need to approach them on each of these channels, which is tricky, especially, when it's like the goalposts move constantly, let's say, right? So that's the sort of thing though, where I think, buzzword alert, but Gen AI is coming in to help, right? Like scale. And these are things that we're thinking about too, like how we can help operators, achieve that on the paid side when it comes to their marketing efforts.
There's so much talk now about the speed of data and how much data is available, and obviously we've seen with the regulated sports betting being new to North America, this boom around live betting and betting in game. And I guess my question is there an ability for paid social to have a role in that during games? Like can paid social support a sports book and getting information out to not just existing customers but potentially new customers?
When you specifically when it comes to kind of in-game betting and such, is that what you're? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but you'll forgive me, it may be a bit of a long-winded answer. I remember before I actually worked in the industry when the whistle ban came in the UK market, right? And this is literally through friends of mine who were working in the industry. I remember discussing with them. And one of the ways that they were deploying social media or paid social to kind of fix that was simply through reach and kind of brand-led messaging in a day-parted fashion, right? So just what time is the match? We'll run some ads on social in that sense to get things across the line. I think that strategy, frankly, still plays and is still valuable in terms of like, highlighting live odds, et cetera, for kind of in-game betting and such. It's something that, we're still absolutely like able to help with, but there's always concerns, I suppose, and things to be aware of on the policy side of things for the platforms and what we can and can't do in terms of showing ads and T's and C's, et cetera. And really also, frankly, ad review times for the paid social ads. So like there's some, some considerations there, but I think with our solution, it's already something that we're able to help with to a large extent right now for operators. Like most of the ads campaigns that we run certainly are, showing live odds during a match, et cetera, up to date in near real time, right? So they are already kind of getting some support on that front.
Do you still, from a paid social standpoint, Mike, is there still perhaps more emphasis on, the quote tentpole events, whether that's, 100-meter men's final at the Olympics or a women's final, or, a U.S. Open men's and women's singles championship, or a Euro final? Is there still, if you're a sports technology company or a sports book or a sports media company, is there still a strategy where you do kind of really lean into those big events?
I think it is the case that's still happening. Like I said, I'm still quite new to this specific corner of the industry, but it seems to follow what I've seen in broader entertainment, which is very much tied. I think the marketing budgets themselves are very much allocated around these tentpole budgets, and therefore everything kind of follows from there. But I do see, I definitely see always on investment as well from our client base today. It depends and certainly differs based on, sportsbook versus casino and adverts on both sides of those businesses. But yeah, it's definitely still quite tentpole driven. I think, even when I was platform side before at TikTok, I saw a lot of that, right? Like that platform, particularly from the leagues that we were, working with, and teams themselves, very much still saw paid social as a kind of brand and community engagement tool versus more a, ticket sale driver. And so therefore it was big splashes around tentpole events, et cetera. And I think I'm, so far seeing similar from the operators, although again, varies based on whether it's the sports or kind of gaming side of the business.
Hey, I want to read a little bit of what you wrote on a LinkedIn post. I think your last LinkedIn post, and quote: "While I was at TikTok and Meta, I witnessed brands and other verticals navigate major shifts in video strategy firsthand." Just on that, can you give an example of a brand that certainly doesn't have to be in the sports space, of a brand that you think successfully navigated, and what that shift was?
Sure. Before, when I was at Meta, it was the time of the shift to stories, and so Instagram stories were the kind of tool of the day for marketers that we were trying to help them kind of crack. And I had a client, I won't name names, but they were a major video game company producer, hardware, and they were. The new consoles were launching, and there was a big push on their side, obviously, to win. Everybody who's ever played video games is probably familiar with the console wars, right? But there was that industry was very much a traditional kind of entertainment industry where, the creative that was briefed out through the agency that came down was a 30-second TV ad, and that's it. Wasn't optimized for social at all. And really across the industry, that was what I was seeing still at the time. We worked a lot, like hands-on with their agency, et cetera. And long story short, we were able to help them kind of rethink and get upstream of their creative strategy to make some stories friendly creative. And it made a big difference. They were very successful with us. That company continues to produce those consoles and do quite well. And yeah, I mean, that's just one example. I saw plenty at TikTok as well, because that platform also was quite unique. Advertisers were coming to us trying to just use Instagram creative and not understand why it wasn't working. But there's really almost like an unquantifiable reality where everybody, it just didn't pass the smell test with the TikTok audience. The typical video strategies that they were using on these other platforms didn't work there, right? So it's the answer that every marketer, I think, when they hear, is like, oh, okay, again. But it's that test and learn mentality, needing to just really dig in and know that it might take a little while to crack, and you need to kind of not necessarily be so rigid in your adoption and interpretation of your brand codes on that platform, and stick with it, But I think that's that's always going to exist in this space. There'll be another TikTok, and then another platform in the future, and it will be different, and the culture of that platform will be different, and therefore the marketing approaches will need to be different. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that I see for the iGaming industry, which is now that like we have technology like we have, which can enable them to not only use video for more generic or offer-led, more awareness-led messaging. They can kind of actually now think about video from an acquisition standpoint at scale with solutions like ours. How do they navigate that? Because it's different, right? Like it's going to necessitate, I think, different approaches and understandings from the brand teams, from the UA teams, et cetera. And I think that's what interested me in coming into this space and seeing what we were doing. So.
Given the fact that you've worked with two huge companies like TikTok and Made, I'm sure part of your job is navigating all the various verticals to help you do your job. I'm just curious what your day-to-day looks like as you still ease into this new gig with Sportradar, and what your job looks like every day.
Yeah, I mean, I have a great team that I sort of walked into who are working with our clients on the front line. So I, part of my time is spent just, in a management capacity, working with them, making sure everything is running well and smoothly on the business side of things with our existing clients. I spend some time speaking with new and prospective clients as well. One thing that I'm really keen on is making sure I know what I'm talking about in this industry at some point, and no replacement for just speaking to the operators themselves and our clients. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand and work with them. And then, yeah, as you suspected, I also spend a lot of time, pinging old colleagues and old colleagues and people that I never met in my former employers to kind of stay in touch and make sure that we're building in the right direction too. And that's a lot of where I focus. So I kind of have a focus across, let's say, the product strategy and the go-to-market strategy in general for what we're doing on paid social at Sportradar. And then I have a kind of business lead capacity where I'm also kind of overseeing our day-to-day operations and all the client campaign management support that we're doing, and the fulfillment of the technology and the like. So it's really kind of ideal for me because I spent time on the product side before at TikTok, but also love the client-facing role where I get to kind of stay in touch with the market and understand what they really need. And that's what I like the most, honestly, about my day-to-day these days.
It's kind of a cool place for you to be because it feels like you're a bit of a middleman between product and marketing, and I think to do what you do, you have to have your fingers on the pulse of everything that's happening with it, not only within your own company, but as you mentioned earlier, seeing what's going on with operators and what their priorities are. And again, this is a fast moving train, this industry, and it's almost, well, it is impossible to keep up on what's going on every day. But at the same time, it is exciting, and I think as we often talk about it on this platform, it's a great industry for a young person to get engaged in because things do happen so quickly, and it is a dynamic industry.
Absolutely, yeah. That's honestly, that's a big reason why I joined here. I saw, these guys are onto something. I really like this industry. I've always kind of had a great admiration for it. And I know maybe to your audience who've been in for a long, long time, they might not think that an outsider could be just super impressed actually by what they're doing on the creative side of things at these brands. And, people can get jaded. But for a new entrant, I have to say, I really love it. I find it exciting. And yeah, it's, as you say, a great role for me day to day in that sense where I get to sort of lean on everything I like to do.
Hey, last question, Mike. I mentioned at the top of the show about the fall sports season and arguably the busiest. I mean, the sport calendar basically is 52 weeks now. There's no, from my early years as a sports journalist, there used to be voids or quiet periods in the sports calendar. That really is no longer the case. What gets you excited as you look towards the fall?
I'd say for me, it's NFL season coming up. I moving to Ireland from the US like 12 years ago, it was pretty hard to stay in touch with the American sports calendar, and I sort of missed the boat on growing up with soccer at the wrong age in the US, and I've tried, but I pay cursory attention, but not so much to the Premier League. So for me, it's the NFL season coming up, and definitely for my sins, I'm a Giants fan, and I'm hopeful that this season will be, a bit better than last, and I think that's what's got me excited. It'll be time for making chili over. It's basically autumn already here in Ireland, so feels very football season-esque. So I'm getting excited.
Mike Cryan is the head of paid social at Sportradar, still selling in a job. Mike, listen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Let's have you back on maybe later at the end of the football season once you've got a bit more time under your belt with Sportradar. But really enjoyed the conversation and giving our listeners a bit of insight into what you do.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I really appreciate it. And just thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show. As always, you can find the podcast at gamingnewscanada.ca and on the various podcast platforms. Again, we're grateful to Mike Cryan for joining us today, and we will see everybody again very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Gaming News Canada Show. Sign up for our newsletter at gamingnewscanada.ca. Follow Steve McAllister on LinkedIn. Message Steve if you're interested in being a sponsor or featured guest.